Good afternoon, it's Friday the 29th of September 2017, just after 1 o'clock, and welcome to UK Column. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. We're delighted to be joined today by David Ellis, Strategic Defence Initiatives, and David Scott, of course, reporting from north of the border with Northern Exposure. Well, we better get straight on to the big boys, and here's the Telegraph. And apparently we should all be very frightened, Mike, because those nasty North Koreans could let off a nuclear bomb. And here is the Telegraph making a huge article about the spread of radioactivity, which they've based on a tweet.
Really?
I think we can safely label this fake news, but of course this is really propaganda because it's designed to make people fearful. So no real substance. This is just lots of graphic to get us thinking about the spread of radioactive fallout.
It's interesting. RUSI produced a report on North Korea yesterday or the day before, and they're saying that more or less it's inevitable that the United States is going to go to war with North Korea. So, you know, it's a bit shocking that the Telegraph didn't pick up on that and perhaps use that as a basis for their article.
Or perhaps they did. And of course, remember, RUSI is better known as UC. Put an EU in front of it and you'll know who's advising the British government on defence policy. UC is the correct terminology.
Which brings us nicely into this, because of course Theresa May was speaking to British troops yesterday in Tallinn in Estonia. 800 British troops, part of the NATO's enhanced forward presence in Eastern Europe. French and Danish partners there as well. Of course, the Estonians were hosting the situation, so they're involved. This is all part of our collective commitment to NATO's Article 5, which is the all for one, one for all policy that NATO has. Well, what did Theresa May have to say in her speech to these 800 servicemen? She said, Russia's continued aggression represents a growing danger to our friends here in Estonia, as well as in Latvia, Lithuania and Poland, and our response must be clear and unequivocal. For when a nation like Russia deliberately violates the rules-based international order that we have worked so hard to create, we must come together with our allies to defend that international system and the liberal values of democracy, human rights, rule of law by which we stand.
I'm feeling ill already.
Yes. She went on to say, while we're leaving the European Union, as I've said many times, we're not leaving Europe. So the United Kingdom is unconditionally committed to maintaining Europe's security, and we will continue to offer aid and assistance to EU member states that are victims of armed aggression, terrorism and natural or man-made disasters. Our resolve to draw on the full weight of our military, intelligence, diplomatic and development resources to lead international action with our partners on the issues that affect the security and prosperity of our peoples is unchanged, and our determination to defend the stability, security and prosperity of our European neighbours and friends remains steadfast. So this was the thing that was making the headlines in the mainstream media this morning, this unconditional commitment to European defence and security. Well, this was followed up today because she is at the Tallinn Digital Summit, which is all about cyber security and so on. And this is a European Union summit. So she is meeting other EU leaders. This is her arriving for the dinner that she was attending last night, hosted by Donald Tusk. It was an informal dinner with EU leaders, apparently. They exchanged views on the most important challenges that they face, 1 year following the Bratislava roadmap. But they say that the aim of this summit is to serve as a platform for launching high-level discussions on digital innovation, enabling Europe to stay ahead of the technological curve. This is mainly to do with cybersecurity. Of course, a big area with regards to both EU military unification and NATO. They are very keen to have this technological capability. So she was speaking about this visit, and she said that from terrorism to cybercrime, illegal migration to Russian aggression, the threats we face as Europeans are increasing in their scale and complexity. Now more than ever, it is in our interest to confront them together. with the largest defence budget in Europe, a far-reaching diplomatic network, world-class security, intelligence and law enforcement services, our position at the heart of NATO, the UK's role in Europe's defence, has never been more vital. As we prepare for Brexit, I want to build a bold, new security partnership with the European Union, a partnership that reflects our shared history, promotes our common values and maintains a secure and prosperous Europe. NATO remains the bedrock of our collective security, and there is no clearer demonstration of UK's unconditional commitment to Europe's defence than the 800 troops in Tallinn. We will continue to work with our NATO allies, our European neighbours and the EU to support a future partnership of unprecedented breadth and depth that will guarantee the security and stability of the continent for generations to come. So this, Brian, if there's anything that highlights that Brexit is nothing of the kind, what Brexit is being used for is to drive a new partnership, which is of even more depth and breadth than the one we've got at the moment. And let's just have a look at the document that the government released a week or two ago, Foreign Policy, Defence and Development, and look at a couple of quotes from this. And it's saying that basically, first of all, listing the agreements that we've got. We've got the Lancaster House agreements with the French, where we're getting closer with the Germans and so on. And they're saying, the UK and European defence and security industries can continue to work together. And so they're absolutely demonstrating and providing the evidence, if any evidence was needed, that David Ellis has been absolutely correct from day one on this. Defence unification, procurement unification, the military-industrial complex, a unified item.
Unified item, and we'll be able to get into a bit more detail, but perhaps we should get straight over to David Ellis. David, this is exactly what you've been warning about.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it's exactly what we've been warning about, apart from the fact that they're just perverting the language, so it's not easy to see. So everyone's just got to do the decryption, as Mark, the Truth Hound, says, and as I say, just translate it. So they're saying unconditional. That's a bit scary. So has that been evaluated? But what's really going on here, of course, is that they're steamrollering military unification and military union through, and they just don't want to use the language, because obviously a great section of our population will wake up and realise what that is and not be happy. So there's very specific reasons that the EU are doing this, and they need it desperately in order to unlock the keys to their treasury. So they've got the currency union, and now they need the military union. So it's a bit like a lock and a key. One's no good without the other. So at the point they get the threshold, which I believe is now, for military union, military unification, to sort of the unification process to come to an end, and the actual physical hard union itself to kick in, we're now going to be looking at some very different arrangements. But there is, what's Brexit then if our military is actually in this thing called military union, but Theresa May just doesn't want to talk about it, nor her cabinet.
David, just to interject, if I may, what's the sort of feedback on the ground? You are well connected with certainly senior ex-military people. Do people know about this? Do people in the MOD know what's going on? Or is everybody just ignorant of what the government is really doing at the moment?
Well, that's a great question, Brian. I mean, very clearly, the politicians are ignorant or inept or unwilling or unable, whatever they are. By deed or effect, it's the same result for the nation and the general public. Believe you me, the MOD aren't. The MOD know all about this. I was speaking to somebody yesterday, works within the MOD, and they know all about it. They've had the briefing. Yes, we've had the pitch. It's a wonderful thing, military unification, military union. They were using the right words, which is strange because the politicians won't or don't. And of course, there are no gaps if you look at it on a pan-European basis. So what we see on a national level as this is shocking and outrage from the likes of Deborah Haynes at the Times there. If you look at it on a pan-European perspective, there aren't, because they're going to, that country there will do this and that country there will do that and that country there. And when we round it all up together in military union, it'll all be fine and rosy.
David, I'm going to come back in if I may, because I think I can help our viewers and listeners see this. Let's bring in some of the previous reports we've had in the press. Navy battling to save 500 million after bungled deal for ships. So here we've got the Theresa May saying that we have world-class military, but the reality published is that we've got major problems. And what's going on here is this is Britain's military being cut so that it is easier to integrate us into this EU system. We've got this headline: Royal Marines facing cut in numbers to meet 500 million shortfall. Royal Navy can only send a quarter of its warships to sea. And this one is about a huge sell-off of major equipment. So we know that the reality is Britain's military forces are being decimated, but this makes sense in an EU setting, because if Britain's forces are too strong, we don't need the EU, so we cut and cut, so the government can then say, but don't worry, because the French will cover this and the Germans will cover that. So we'll follow it through. I picked up on this little article here. Well, Mike's just covered the committed to defence part, but underneath was an interesting little article saying that this piece of equipment, a replacement for the Snatch Land Rover, didn't work. It breaks down in the heat of combat, Mike. It's a bit like the Type 45.
So we've got the Type 45s that can't sail into warm waters because they break down, and these armoured personnel carriers can't drive around in warm desert areas because they break down a lot.
Well, the engine's cut out. This is what it looks like. To me, it looks like the design that the South Africans created at least 30 or 40 years ago. But it's apparently the bee's knees, but it doesn't work if it gets hot. It was supposed to replace the Snatch Land Rover. But I was fascinated because the Mail said that the Ministry of Defence ordered 400 units of this thing, Foxhound, from General Dynamics Land Systems, a company based in Leamington Spa, Warwickshire. So they would have you believe that some little company has made a bit of a cock up. Well, we'll have a look at it. Who is this? Well, this is actually General Dynamics. This is a massive American company. And if we take a little look into it, we find Harriet Baldwin, Parliamentary Undersecretary for Procurement for the military, and she's been praising them. I'm delighted to see that the General Dynamics ARES, that's the troop carrier, is in action. This vehicle and the others in the Ajax, the light armoured family, will give the British Army a multi-role mounted fighting power and reconnaissance capability fit for the future. We continue to invest in the best equipment for our armed forces, and I'm delighted to support such strong investment in Wales. Now, she's actually talking about the tracked vehicles, not directly about the one with the fault, but this is a massive American company. This is nothing to do with supporting British industry. This is just having a few people working alongside General Dynamics. There we are. So what's this lady think of herself? Well, this is her Twitter page, and I was astonished because clearly she thinks she's made it. Harriet is in with a jet set, and a lot of people say that a lot of UK column news is a bit heavy. Well, I'll just introduce a little bit of lightness because I was shocked to see this. I don't know where you see that I think that's Admiral Philip Jones, head of the Navy. I'm not sure where his hand is, but
well, she's got a grin on her face.
Well, anyway. She's smiling, and the French admiral, presumably behind, is looking a little bit shocked as well. He might. But here we are. We have this very junior minister clearly thinks she's made it into the jet set. But what's the reality? Well, this was the Malvern Gazette did an article on her, and she posed with her teddy bear. Telling us, of course, that she used to head the currency management section of JP Morgan. So we've got Prime Minister Theresa May and with the banks. We've got the procurement minister when she's not playing with her teddy. And this is the same lady that wrote to me to say that it was clearly nonsense to suggest that we had military equipment that didn't work. You know, I'll blow that up for people to freeze the screen and read it themselves afterwards. But the evidence all there.
So it says "Dear Gary" there. That's because she was writing to Gary Streeter.
Yeah, you'll see, I'm actually mentioned in the text on one of them. So let's have a look. Here's this little vehicle that we're supposed to believe was produced by some little company tucked away in the country. We know it's part of General Dynamics UK Limited, and this is part of a 3.9 billion contract. So this is for American profits, it's not for the British. They're part of General Dynamics overall, 39 billion US dollar company. This is where it gets fascinating. This is the chairman, Phoebe Novakovic, and she's an interesting lady because she just happened to work for the CIA. In fact, many people say she probably still does. And here she is with her husband, David Morrison, but her previous husband was Michael Vickers, who was the CIA man responsible for arming the Mujahideen.
Oh.
So he would have been pumping arms into Afghanistan, where British troops are now left with equipment from his ex-wife's company, which doesn't work. And we're to believe that the woman with the teddy bear is in control of all this. Perhaps I could ask David Scott to comment here. We use the phrase La La Land increasingly, but this is deliberate breakdown. This is the Mad Hatter's Tea Party, which seems to me to be to break down the whole constitutional structure of the UK.
It's the thick of it. It's in the loop. This is Nicola Murray. She even looks like Nicola Murray. And the teddy bear, oh yes, it's comedy. It's life imitating art.
Well, David, can I just give you a fraction more? I'll let you finish, but let me bring in this one, because if you're worried that this is some kind of global corporation feeding on death, General Dynamics, well, you shouldn't be worried, because I checked this out. This is our ethos, and one of the things that they're going to tell us is that they're very concerned to help humanity. So in the middle, they've got the little globe. And don't worry what they're up to, because they're looking after communities and humanity when they're not producing the munitions to kill them.
Well, of course, if they don't look after humanity, they'll have nobody to blow up.
So David, sorry, do finish.
I remember when that little vehicle was created, when it was designed, and the story I recall was a plucky little British company coming up with this, and it wasn't even commissioned by the MOD. It was they came up with it as a solution, and it got such support the MOD was kind of forced to go down this route. So either that wasn't true, or they've been taken over. It has been a plucky little British company, but they've been swallowed up by an American multinational. I'll need to look into which one it is.
Well, David Ellis, just briefly, that is exactly the point you'd be making. British industry swallowed up by internationalist, globalist corporations.
Yeah, quite. I mean, it's the industry. The money flows into the industry first. You know, you follow the money, you find policy, and this is at one end of the circle, and it'll soon loop round through the other facets into the scenario that we keep warning of. I mean, this MOD guy was saying to me, he said, I don't frankly understand this. That why are not the politicians looking at it? Why aren't they researching it? Is it that they're unaware? Are they not interested? Are they inept? What's it? So, I mean, we can ask that question of Harriet Baldwin. What are you doing?
This is a good question.
Well, I'm going to suggest here with a bit of a wry smile, because this is a bit of black humour, but I think the picture of her put out with the teddy bear was an acknowledgement that she is just a child being controlled by these global interests. To suggest that Harriet Baldwin knows what she's doing is an insult to the general public. That woman is there because she doesn't know what she's doing, and therefore she can be completely fooled and manipulated and controlled by those global interests. But it's obscene to follow that circle round. We've got servicemen and women dying because of rubbish equipment, and the people creating the rubbish equipment were creating the wars that the servicemen and women are dying in the first place.
Which is perfect, Brian, because let's bring this one in. The headline in the Telegraph is that Boris Johnson is the favourite amongst Tory members to take over from Theresa May as Tory party leader. This is all about the so-called battle to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. He apparently has 23% of the party's vote in the poll so far. Surprisingly, Ruth Davidson comes second. She's the Scottish Tory leader on 19%, and then Jacob Rees-Mogg on 17%, followed by David Davis, who's falling out of favour because as people recognise that Brexit isn't really happening, he's got 11%. So, look, this cannot happen. Boris cannot be allowed to become leader, and why not? And the answer is because he has blood on his hands. Now, on the 15th of April 2017, if you remember, if you were watching UK Column News, a car bomb was detonated near a convoy of buses in the Al Rashdin neighbourhood of western Aleppo. The buses had civilian evacuees from besieged government-controlled towns in Syria. These were Kafaya and Al-Fur. And of course these towns were being held in siege by ISIS and Al-Qaeda and so on. And the buses were being, so in inverted commas, guarded by rebel insurgents, by terrorists. Now, Vanessa Beeley was in Syria at the time, and she arrived on the scene within an hour following that explosion. So I'm just going to remind everybody of what she said. Will just be a moment on this.
They were then held in the buses for about 48 hours with limited food and water. The women and children were allowed off to go to the toilet. The men were kept on the buses for 48 hours, not even allowed off to go to the toilet. They were given limited food and water. On the morning of the 15th, members of Nusra Front and al-Sham turned up with bags, big transparent bags full of crisps. And they let the children off the bus. The children, and I've witnessed this myself in Jibrin in December 2016, swarmed off the buses, not having seen food like this for over 2 years. They allowed them off the buses for 10 minutes. They then put them back on the buses and blockaded them in the buses. Then about 10 minutes before the explosion, I was told by one lady that she'd asked to get off to get some medicine from the Syrian Arab Red Crescent that were waiting to take them into Aleppo. She was told the Syrian Arab Red Crescent had been sent away previously, about an hour previously, which again they found very strange. Then minutes after that, she said that they opened the doors to the buses, they allowed off the young men and the children. And again, the man appeared with the plastic bags full of chips, and of course the children swarmed towards him, and that was when the explosion went off. So this was a clear luring of the children to their slaughter.
A luring of the children to their slaughter. Now, Vanessa has written first of a two-part article series on the Rashdin bus bombing on 21st Century Wire. I'm going to say to everybody, please share this. At the time, and still, I viewed this as one of the most obscene events from the whole time of obscene events in Syria. This was, I was speechless, and I'm still speechless about how this was allowed to happen. But the fact of the matter is that Boris Johnson cannot become leader of the Tory party. He certainly can never be prime minister. He has got blood in his hands. Now, I can say that money he sent to Syria went to people who carried out, I cannot say that he said that the money that he sent to Syria went to people that carried out the bombing. Of course not, but I can say that it has gone to the types of people that have carried out this bombing. He and the Foreign Office can't deny that because there's too much evidence to show it, and we've shown that evidence over the months and years. And the fact is that to date, let me just remind everybody, the Foreign Office has refused to release the financial records showing where the money to Syria was spent on, what that money was spent on, despite acknowledging to me that they do hold that information. And I'm just going to say, Brian, once again, why do they refuse to provide the information about where that money is gone?
Well, it's always the same, Mike. When people are asking for the right thing, it's the evidence that shows what the government is really doing. They simply pull up the drawbridge and refuse to release the information. This is why Tony Blair said one of his biggest regrets was the whole of the freedom of information legislation. David, Scott, it's just in front of our eyes what these people are doing. They're not British, in these politicians, in my view. They're not British. They're certainly not Christian. I don't know what they are. What's your view?
If we're going to be faced with a choice between Boris Johnson, who is an unethical opportunist, in my view, and Jeremy Corbyn, who is a dangerous ideologue. We're going to have, what do you do with that? That would be a real Hobson's choice. What possibly could the British public do with such a choice put before them? I don't think Ruth Davidson's really in the running for the Conservative leadership. She did well in Scotland, but she wouldn't stand up, I think, to the sort of scrutiny she'd get on the national stage.
Yeah.
So it seems to be Moggy or bust as far as we can tell.
Can we just ask David Ellis, what do we do about these people, David? They've got to be exposed. They've got to be removed in an appropriate way.
There's certainly got to be a bigger section of our population here in Britain wake up and realise what's going on. Everybody that I vox pop with whatever this topic is that we're talking about also is the same. There's no choice. None of them are any good. What do we do? And of course, this is the dilemma. We can have this guy on the one hand, or that guy on the one hand, or this lady or that lady. The current status is within the party political arena is that there is no solution there. It's just more of the same. And what's happening currently is no use whatsoever. So the only way we're going to do this is everybody's got to get busy. We've all got to do more. And as Charles I told us, when we pretty much had a similar problem before in this country. I'm drawing the analogy now to we're pretty much back to a pre-Magna Carta level of problem because we're losing law, and that Chartist mindset that let's just operate with this so we can all get on and we'll not be subject to despots, whether that be our own government or the EU or whoever. And we've got this problem with the money, which is what Charles I had. So he said, democracy expects the extraordinary from the ordinary. So we're all ordinary, if that's the case, if that's what we're going to be designated as, or a term of reference. So we're all going to have to be extraordinary. We've all got to do more. And we'll know how much more when we achieve something. At this point, we're pretty much sort of, we're
getting the top off things, I think. The information's coming out. We're beginning to see the picture. We're beginning to see what we're fighting. And as you're saying, it's now up to everybody to get on and start challenging these people and looking at possible solutions. And that must include restoration of common law and trial by juries.
Okay, so get along to AV 8.1, get networking there, Sunday the 8th of October, 11 to 6 p.m. in the Connaught Rooms in London, and another reminder of Froome Stop Wars event in Bloomsbury Central Baptist Church on the 19th of October, Media on Trial, with John Pilger headlining that.
Okay, and I'll just pop this one in because a lady called Elizabeth Watson, who's been fighting fraud and corruption amongst the banks and the financial industry for many years, needs some help. She's due to appear in court. That's County Court at Bournemouth and Poole this coming Monday. We're saying if you're able to go as a respectful, concerned member of the public, it's so important that these trials do not take place without the public there being able to see and hear exactly what's going on. So if you can get to Bournemouth for Monday morning, I think, there isn't a time there. It's 10 o'clock. I'm pretty sure it's 10 o'clock. So if you can get there, please support Liz Watson.
Okay. Let's get on to the Commonwealth then. The Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting is taking place in April, and they're already preparing for it, of course. Civil society plays a key role, they say, and so they're holding these forum events. And one of the forum events is called the Commonwealth People's Forum, and they say that civil society plays a key role in helping the Commonwealth develop innovative solutions to global development problems and holding governments to account for their commitments. Really, the Commonwealth's People's Forum, organised in partnership with the Commonwealth Foundation, is the single largest opportunity for civil society to engage with leaders and influence policy. And the People's Forum also helps showcase and celebrate shared values and cultures of Commonwealth nations and highlights the diversity of the global community. So that all sounds very good, Brian.
Sounds brilliant.
Yeah. So, but the question is, what is civil society? Because, of course, what they're doing is promoting civil society, and they want civil society to engage with leaders and to influence policy. What is civil society? Well, civil society, according to the Collins English Dictionary at least, is defined as the elements such as freedom of speech, an independent judiciary, etc., that make up a democratic society. That's that definition. If you look on Wikipedia, you find something slightly different. They say that it's an aggregate of non-governmental organizations and institutions that manifest interests and the will of citizens. So neither of those seems terribly satisfactory to me, because actually civil society is really the organizations that's a very specific type of non-governmental organization. So the civil society that the Commonwealth wants to engage with doesn't include any aggregate of non-governmental organisations that are looking after the will of citizens. No. It includes a specific type of NGO which has approval from this organisation, which is the United Nations Economic and Social Council. So they hold consultative status through this Economic and Social Council. And that is what civil society means in this context. It has got nothing to do with freedom of speech or any.
This is a controlling web of organisations which are inherently pro-world government, pro-corporatist government.
Absolutely. So we'll keep an eye on that and report in due course. Now, yesterday we were talking about child abuse, and particularly this issue of consent over child abuse, and the fact, for example, that in various cases recently, we've found that people that have been affected by child abuse have not been given compensation because there was an allegation that they had consented to what was going on to them, and this particularly with regard to Rotherham and so on. Well, Devon and Cornwall Police have tweeted this out today, which I found pretty offensive under the circumstances. Consent means willing agreement. Sex without consent is rape. But that only applies to adults, apparently, because apparently if you're a child, then consent is presumed.
Well, we reported that terrible case from France where an 11-year-old girl apparently consented. This is deliberate stuff coming out from the police and the Home Office and these non-governmental organisations. If you look at the picture overall, we see the picture that they are attempting to normalise sex with children.
David, Scott, tell us a little bit about the Fresh Start Foundation. How's it going?
Well, we're making some progress.
Just first of all, remind everybody what it is.
This is a citizens' inquiry into child sexual abuse in Scotland. Founded in May this year, in order to address the problems with the state-run official inquiry, which, as you may recall, had all of its senior people resign under pressure from the government. They announced they were unable to do their job, and the pressure from the government was coming from connected party officials who were making baseless allegations, which were immediately supported by ministers in order to bring pressure and threats of dismissal on the people running the inquiry. It was utterly disgraceful. So this is a response, and we talked before about people doing more. But this is an example. Our governments are failing us. Our governments are not doing what they say they will do. They're not representing the people. They have no interest in representing the people. They represent their own interests. They represent the interests of keeping power, of keeping access to the taxation money, and really that's about as far as it goes. So we're having an event in October, 26th of October. There'll be a major launch event in Edinburgh, further details to follow, and this will detail exactly how we're going to go about investigating child sexual abuse in Scotland, what the programme is, what the process is going to be, and how we're going to reach out to the victims and survivors all across the country.
So that's not the only initiative that's going on with people taking back control. Common law courts in Great Britain, this is common law courts in Scotland.
Yes, this is fascinating and very, very telling. This court has met on 2 occasions so far, and it's also operating online, so you can register things like births and property with them. When the court meets, the court officers are sworn in the official manner. Everything's decided by juries. It's the people standing up and claiming justice for themselves. And again, this is a response to the system that is meant to serve us, simply being so corrupt and so inaccessible, and forgetting what it's there to do. It's no longer about justice. It's about finding the answer that fits the interests of those with power. So this is the people standing up and saying, no, that's not right. We will do better. So it's certainly one to watch. If anyone can support this in any way, even just simply by registering and building up a history that this organisation is actually active and working as a court, this will all help as it gains in strength and gains in renown. I would hope within the country, we will I hope see people turn to it and leave the existing system behind.
David, this is so important here. What we've got is the action. David Ellis says we need people to really stand up and be counted and start to do things. If you follow through the corruption in this country, of course, we've had an attack on the Constitution and a massive attack on common law, which has been pushed to one side by Admiralty statute law. Barristers don't even understand what the real law is, but we know, of course, people further up the food chain, senior judges, many of the politicians and the bankers know full well that their objective was to hide common law. So for people to reinstate common law, including trial by juries, this is very, very powerful stuff. And I hope we're going to be able to see this occurring south of the border.
And David, just one final Scottish story then, because this is from Scottish Review. It's called the Hislop Doctrine. It seems that people in Scotland, the authorities, the establishment of Scotland, attempting to tell people what it wants to see in terms of culture and art.
Yes, this is an article by the excellent Rainer Leuken, who is a 40-year Scottish resident, but he's German originally, and he brings an interesting perspective to the Scottish political scene as he looks at it with his knowledge of German history. And here the comparison is with the Kaiser. This was prompted by Fiona Hislop saying the following: artists don't have to be close to government, they just have to have a common understanding of what the country wants, a way of bridging, of helping ambition for the country. So artists are not free in this view to say or do or challenge whatever they wish. No, they have to have this common understanding, which of course means the party understanding, the government understanding, was Hislop's understanding. And this
sorry, David, can I just clarify for me, was this not the relationship between the art community and Hitler?
Well, yes, and Kaiser and Stalin, and yes, name your oppressive regime, and they will have a bodyguard of academics, of intelligentsia, of people to defend their reason for being, and that will be artists, and it will also be thinkers and academics. All regimes need this sort of bodyguard of ideological defence, and this is it coming into Scotland.
Well, we're now talking about the reality of the beast coming in. Let's remind ourselves that a couple of days ago a man died in Portishead after armed police surrounded the car and fired 10 rounds. We say it was a summary execution. As far as I see by the news, by the wider news today, we still don't know who this man was, who his family was, what he was really accused of. He was simply shot dead. And of course, if they can do it to that man in the car, it can be done to any individual. And I'm going to remind people, lest we forget, this is the Metropolitan Police asking all London police officers whether they want to carry a gun. Now, many won't because they're smart enough to understand what's being created here. But of course, the worst kind will want to carry a gun. The people who are inherently desensitized, the people who are sociopaths or indeed psychopaths within the police force, they are certainly going to want to carry guns. So we can see what's building here, and it's not very nice. And let's just add this one in. A tweet which I just happened to come across by chance as I was putting helping to put the news together today. It's from the National Audit Office. I thought you'd be interested in that, Mike. And government offices are moving into, quote, hubs. Recent estate management lessons will help address the big challenges. Now, what I say is going on here is hub means that we've got to opaque government, no separation of powers. And this is really collectivization of the civil service. This is yet more indication of I say it's a fascist state. We could call it communitarian. I'm just come back to David Scott here. David, I'll ask again, what is this that's building?
This is the Scottish model of government. This is what was sneaked in 2007 by Sir John Elvidge, head of the Scottish Civil Service then. This is the Scottish model of government is joined up government to the ultimate degree. Departmental boundaries disappear as functional realities. So if you deal with government, you deal with one organisation. So what you tell the NHS, the police know. What you tell housing, mental health know. It's all one organisation. They will share information, they will share it widely. And when you need intervention in your life, intervention will be provided.
One public estate, that's what it's been labelled as.
One public estate, yeah. One dictatorship.
Not much more to say.
Okay. Do you want to talk taxes?
No.
You don't? Okay. David Ellis, just come back. What message would you have for those very senior retired British military officers about what's taking place in this country?
Well, that's easy. As of this week, we've pretty much got it nailed down that the politicians are not looking at this. They have missed it. I was told during Brexit by not just officers but politicians that it's okay, we're not having it, we're not going to do it. Well, they have done it, and they are doing it. And it's under the guise of a Trojan horse. So, everybody's got to stand to here now. We've got to realise just one one sensible thing. This isn't an EU army. This is unification of our army into the EU. And it will come under EU control, budgetary and procurement control. It will also come under command of the EU. There's a manual exists already, subsequent to the Lisbon Treaty, for the EU to take command. Now, I spoke to Lord Tebbit this morning, and he said it's all right, we're nowhere near them taking command. Well, they can, and they have the capability to take command because it's done under the guise of crisis management, crisis centres. So if you look on our Twitter feed at Strategic Defence, you'll see the pinned tweet where CGRM, the current serving officer, states clearly to a specific question that this is a military HQ. Well, it's actually under the guise of the EU's crisis management revolving centres, and there are 4 across the pan-EU arena. Now, the handbook already exists in the EU to take control of the forces. They will take command under a crisis that they probably designate as a crisis from the Council. And it's under the guise of Note 6 from the Common Security and Defence Policy. And that was agreed as of March of this year. And it's called a concept note, operational planning and conduct capabilities for CSDP missions and operations. It's a 16-page document, but basically my take on it is this is the manual of how to take command of the forces. So if anybody's under any illusion about where we are with this, the military union has all bar got to the threshold now. They already have the manual to take command of the forces, and they have the capability to manage them through these crisis centres, which are clearly military command centres. So this is a Trojan horse, and it's here right now. Now, Major General Julian Thompson is going to be speaking at the Bruges Group at the fringe meeting of the Conservative Party conference this Monday at Manchester Town Hall. Anybody that wants to support him in this cause of stopping it, I think we've got to get to a stopping it, raising awareness level very quickly in this country. Can you please attend or link up in some fashion, either with us, UK Column, or Major Julian Thompson himself? You can link up with him indirectly through Veterans for Britain. But we've got to do it, and we've got to do it right now.
Okay, David, thank you very much for that. And David, Scott, thank you also for joining us. There we have it. We're ending this week on a very serious note. And just so that there's no misunderstanding, in talking and supporting our military, many good men and women, of course, prepared to fight and die for their family, friends, and this country. While they're prepared to do that, we have this incestuous Trojan horse, as Dave Ellis says, which is handing away our constitutional powers to the EU under the lie of Brexit, and that's a lie which Prime Minister Theresa May is happy to continue to spread worldwide. If you want to do something, well, let's get in and support in those two cases. So that's the Major General who's going to be talking. And also, if you want to get in on the ground to help somebody who's fought for years against fraud and corruption, remember that court hearing in Bournemouth this coming Monday at 10 o'clock. That's it from us. If you like what we do, please subscribe. We need your help to continue to report the news. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.